Welcome, folks. Thank you for joining us on this lovely day. So excited for you all to be joining us just to do some introductory pieces for our funder, MHTTC, aka the New England Mental Health Technology Transfer Center Network. We're going to go through a couple of our introductory slides, and then we will get to the thing you all came to come here for. Dr. Ashley Stewart doing covering our racial equity audits that we've been doing through New England MHTTC. We will get Ashley on the horn in just a little bit, but just going through for you to know throughout today's event, participant microphones will be muted at entry, and you'll be able to unmute during the discussion portion of our webinar. Closed captioning is available for the event, so you can click on the closed captioning icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen to select a transcription option. The session is being recorded, and it will be available on the MHTTC website within 24 hours of the close of the presentation. Along with the link will be sent out information about certificates of completion, aka certificates of attendance for today's event. And also, if you have any questions during the webinar, as Ashley said in the chat, you are encouraged to unmute. However, you can also use the raise hand feature if you want to just get in there real quick while Ashley's in the middle of a thought. And then we will also have the discussion portion, so you'll be able to ask any questions there, but please feel free to throw them in the chat ahead of time. We love to have questions to think through as we're going in. And if you have any other questions after this session, please email newengland@mhttcnetwork.org. I will put that in the chat before today's session is ended. But very, very excited to have you all here today. Go through our disclaimer. This was prepared by the New England Mental Health Technology Transfer Center under a cooperative agreement from the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA. All materials, except that taken directly from copyrighted sources, is in the public domain. And we also ask that you do not reproduce or distribute this presentation for a fee without specific written authorization from the NEMHTTC. All right, a little bit about how we run our programs if you've never been to an MHTTC event before. The MHTTC network uses language that is affirming, respectful, and recovery-oriented, strengths-based and hopeful, inclusive and accepting of diverse cultures, genders, perspectives, and experiences, inviting to individuals participating in their own journeys, person-first and free of labels, non-judgmental and avoiding assumptions, respectful, clear, and understandable, and consistent with our action policies and products. So thank you all for joining us and utilizing those same standards in today's event. Also, to do our land acknowledgement, as a committed ally, New England MHTTC recognizes that the New England area is home to the ancestral land of many Native tribes. Consistent with our values of community and inclusion, we acknowledge that all the places our distributed staff live and work, as well as where we provide services and hold events, are Indigenous lands. Myself, I am currently calling in from Nipmuc, Pecumtuck, and Wabanaki Confederacy land in Western Massachusetts. Sorry about that, skipped ahead. So please feel free, if you are not aware of or questioning where you are currently located, I'll put a chat link there for the Native Land Digital, which is a place where you can enter your address and see the different Native organizations and tribes in your area. So I'll do that just after I turn off my own microphone. But just so excited for you all to join us. And please, if you haven't already, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, where you're coming from, what you do, what brought you here today. And we are so, so thankful to have you all with us today. So with no further ado, I am going to hand over the reins to our presenter today, Dr. Ashley Stewart.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Lee. Hi, everyone. How you doing? How you feeling? Oh, I'm spotlighted. Let me know in the chat how you're feeling today. We got some folks still joining us. I love it. Oh, folks didn't know I'm going to be asking you to type in and join in and participate throughout the entirety of it. So just a heads up there. Feeling calm. I like that. I like that. Content, tired, but excited to be here. I love that. Focused. Wonderful. Amazing. Please continue to type in the chat. I want to hear how folks are feeling today. Get a pulse on the room. I don't want to give like level 10 energy and y'all are on like level 2. Try to meet folks where they're at. Frazzled and focused. Listen, Mary, that resonates. That resonates. It's a gray day there, but happy to hear. Yeah. What Lee just put in the chat is a place to learn more about the land that you are currently occupying. All right, great. Well, listen, I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited for the opportunity to talk about the equity audit process and a little bit about me. As Lee mentioned, I'm the director of the Center on Equity at C4 Innovations. I love what I do. I work around institutionalized forms of identity-based oppression. I think this webinar series, more so than any, really resonates a lot with my passion behind my work in a different and unique way, because I started out looking at and providing space for individuals and communities responding to different types of racial trauma, responding to different types of identity-centered trauma. And in that meaningful and dynamic work that I was doing, what consistently came up were the ways that organizations, practices, community centers, places where people were going for support, were reactivating and sometimes contributing to the harm that folks were experiencing. And so that really began to shift my work profoundly to say, how do I support organizations? How do I support institutions? How do I support folks who are maybe intending to do this work really well, but are perpetuating forms of harm knowingly and sometimes unknowingly, and doing it differently? And so I think that is
important part of this work and something that we get to do through the auditing process. So that's a little bit about me. I also teach classes. I'm a professor focused on social justice, equity, and inclusion. And I also a mental health professional. So get it from all sides. Just so you know what we're going to do today, we're going to start off. I see folks were already introducing themselves in the chat. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself with one other prompt response in just a moment. So just giving folks a heads up if you need to get to your keyboard. Then we're going to talk about equity conversational best practices. If anyone's been in a session with me before, these might seem familiar. I'm clicking through to see. I see some names that I recognize. Hey, y'all. So we'll go over the equity combo best practices. Then we're going to go over the equity first framework, a framework that I developed and we use in the Center on Equity. And then we're going to talk about why. Why do an equity audit? We're going to talk about the process of the equity audit. We're going to talk about what are the ingredients that are necessary and needed for change. And then we're going to prepare for experiential learning, which will be part 2 of this series. So if you have not registered for the second part of it, I do encourage folks to do so, because we're going to continue to dive into it, and each of the sessions are going to layer on one another. So I would highly encourage that people participate in the full sequence. And then I just also wanted to make a note, these slides are black and white. They have a lot of graphics. So in addition to the presentation today being viewable again, I also wanted to remind folks that if you require, need, or would like accessible slides, or if you utilize a reader, I have accessible notes and slides that I can share with folks that would be reader friendly. So I wanted to share that with anyone who would like those. All right. Yeah, of course. Thank you for acknowledging that, Mary. It's very important to me on a personal level. So about the series, the first part of this webinar, so the first sessions will cover language around addressing and advocating for equity-related topics. It is intended, this is a racial equity audit series, and also the audit processing evaluates for sexism, ageism, ableism, heterosexism, linguistic and religious-based oppression as a short list, but certainly there's so much that evolves, and we realize as we dive into equity conversations, the more and more that we need to begin to assess. So a starting list, but certainly not an exhaustive list, but probably more than what folks are usually looking for when they're doing some sort of an assessment or audit. And then the second part will cover general tone and essence of websites, or also talk about how folks can utilize this process around documents that you're having, around equity, inclusion, and diversity, as well as looking at the different stories and narratives. And I'll bring in some physical examples, but I'm also, you'll see later in the slide today, I'm going to ask you to kind of come prepared to talk about some things too with your groups. Wonderful. I appreciate the question, the comment. Lee, if you could drop the registration links for all of the days, that would be amazing. So you can make sure that they're all there. Oh, thanks, Christina. Christina put it in the chat. Hey, Christina, it's good to see you. Okay. So I know you already shared your name and your organization in the chat. I would love to get us started in our conversation today. I would love to hear about your favorite thing about where you work. And maybe it's not about where you work, but your favorite thing about the work you do. Put it in the chat for me. You're also welcome to come off mute and share if you like, if you speak, if you'd like to speak as opposed to typing. Give folks a moment to respond.
So my name is Devin Rush. Hey, how's everybody doing this afternoon? I work for Mental Health of America, forensic services. So what we're doing right now is we're going into different county jails throughout the state of Indiana, and it's the IRACS program. So what the IRACS program is, you basically do the intake on the individual when they come in. You then run engagement groups. We have a resource navigator, and we also have a peer that helps the individual transition back out into the community. I'm an individual with lived experience being incarcerated before. So to see something this beautiful actually taking place, it just warms my heart. You know what I mean? Because people are actually getting the help that they need for sustainable recovery and, you know what I mean, a successful life. So it's really a blessing to be a part of it.
That's amazing. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that into the space. Yes. Lovely. Community outreach, helping and holding the megaphone. Yes. Working in the government departments that help people, social media content creation for a variety of folks. Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Connecting with families in the area that are going to local events and working with children. Honoring and respecting multiple pathways to recovery. Yeah, while folks are putting that in the chat, I realized I didn't really share too much about C4 Innovations. And so C4 Innovations is a mission-driven, vision-led organization that promotes equity and inclusion across a multitude of different areas. A big part of that is in equity and inclusion, like we're talking about today. It's in recovery, it's in housing, it's in mental health. And so a lot of this is very near and dear to our hearts as well. And we've worked with a lot of you on some of those things. So that's exciting to see too. Contributing to visibility and celebrating and honoring families that have not felt valued in various systems, right? I love this. And the reason why I'm asking folks to share in the chat, because as we get into this auditing process, there's also the element of it that this is about getting to roots. We do a lot in branches and in leads, right? We do a lot of the work in providing services or looking at the policy or advocating or whatever that looks like in our different capacity. And then there's these deep, deep roots of what we've come to do and why we've come to do it. And so while most people would look at an equity auditing process and think that it's about language and ensuring that the pictures that you're posting are reflective of the people you're serving, that's a component of it. But a big component of it is getting to those roots of what you're intending to do and what you're actually doing in your organizations. And we can assess that quickly by identifying what's meaningful and dynamic about the work that we do. I love it. Yeah. Feel empowered showed you, teach you how to reach others within the field and move the needle in trauma-informed care. Yeah. In that link that Christina sent, I'm sure you can also see the other sessions. We're actually running one on equity as well. All right. Thank you. And please feel welcome to continue to put in the chat. Just because I'm switching the slide for time's sake does not mean we're past this conversation. So I will your responses in the chat. To that point, these are the equity-centered best practices. These are for engaging in conversations. I'm going to ask them for us throughout the series, but I also think it's a helpful tool for people who are maybe planning to implement something like audit processing. You're probably thinking about the culture at large. And so these are things that are really helpful. One is to acknowledge that it's a journey and prioritize it being a journey. We like to tie bows on things or have this meeting and this 5-step plan. The reality as we move towards being more equitable and inclusive organizations is going to be a journey. It's going to be ever evolving. And that's part of the beauty of it. So expect a lack of closure and instead embrace it as a journey. And if closure is necessary or needed for certain components of it, making sure that that's an honored process as opposed to something that feels like it's a requirement in order to do the work. We will always be evolving and recognizing more gaps, and that is actually the goal. Ask for clarification. There's 36 of us on this call, which means that there's 36 different perspectives, there's 36 different realities. And so as folks are chatting in the chat, which I encourage folks to do, I absolutely welcome folks to ask for clarification as well. Embrace discomfort. It's a natural part of growth. And we might be diving into some topics that many of us don't have the opportunity to talk about on a day-to-day basis. And even if we are, it doesn't necessarily mean that we get to utilize or exercise our voice in the conversation. So I want to encourage people to do that. This is a space for learning. This is a space for us. And so I welcome people into that space, knowing that every single person in here brings knowledge and expertise to this topic, and that this is a communal learning space. This work is for us and not for other people. Equity is not a 5-point, 10-point stance. It's not a something to sprinkle on top. It is woven into the practices of the organization, into the culture. It might be turning stuff upside down sometimes, right? And so this is the work for us and not for other people. We, of course, take things that we learn and we support other people in doing it, but it's also about really seeing ourselves as rooted in the work. Honoring all experiences and expertise, C4 Innovation, as well as MHTTC through the values center lived experience as paramount is a paramount form of expertise. And so I welcome people to bring your lived expertise into this room today. Know that it'll be celebrated, know that it'll be welcome, know that it'll be prioritized. Revisiting welcomes my favorite. It acknowledges that we have different processing speeds and different processing types. So you might be on, I might be on slide 10 and you're still on this slide. As soon as you have that, I should have said thought, I want you to put it in the chat. I want you to say it. I want you to bring it back up. And I encourage you within your organizations to establish a culture where revisiting things are welcome. We have been so conditioned in our society to have automatic responses. But some of us, we might be able to identify right in the moment, oh, this is how exactly I feel. But how many of us are the people who at 2 o'clock, 3 o'clock in the morning, maybe the next day, maybe 5 slides down are like, that's what I wanted to say, right? And we feel like we missed that opportunity to do so. So we welcome all different ways and types of processing. And so if it comes up in the 3rd session, bring it back up, even if it's from this session. We want to create a space to do that. And then that also helps us to practice the skill of like listening to hear as well, because many times because of those same reasons of, social conditioning, we're also taught to have an immediate response to people. And so I want folks to feel welcome to relinquish that in this space as well. To say, if I listen and then my thought comes back up later because I was fully present listening, that's okay, because we can always go back, and really encouraging more healthy engagement. Accountability and clarity are kind. Everyone opted to come here is here because you're interested in how to do something tangible to increase equity at your organization, or are thinking about how to be more tangible in pursuing equity. And so there's a baseline there. There's a baseline that we have established. So if I say something, for example, that is disaligned with that baseline, and Lee or Christina, who I work with every day, come to me and they say, "Hey, Ashley, I don't know if you noticed, but this dynamic shifted when you said that, or the term that you use is actually one that is harmful to people in this context." That's so kind of them to do. It's kind for them to tell me. It's kind for them to take the courage to bring that up to me and mention it to me. It's kind for me to receive that as an opportunity to do something different and to potentially take accountability for the harm that might have caused. And it's also kind to the folks who I won't make that mistake again with, because now it's brought into my awareness. So we usually are pretty temperamental in these spaces because of fear of call out or call in culture. But if we begin to do a paradigm shift to say there's a baseline in most of the spaces that we're in, that accountability can be really, really kind. So, and then we cannot challenge what we cannot acknowledge. We have to put things on the table to be able to challenge them. And so that's what that third one is about. Any that stand out to you, question, or one you have a question on, or like clarification on? Ones that stand out to you. You can type it in the box. You can yell it out real quick if you like. Yeah, so I'm glad that someone just did this. So there's also an opportunity that if you want to share or contribute, and you don't want to share or contribute with the whole group, if you send things to me personally, I'll read the comment, but I won't read your name. So someone says to me directly that they really appreciate the revisiting welcome, because they like to have time to process. So thank you for bringing them to the space. Someone else. Embrace discomfort. It's okay to make mistakes. And then he says, yeah, that's part of the cultural humility process. So good. That's so good. Isa says, this is not the work for others, it's for us. I love it. That's great. I've been teaching online since way, way, way before the pandemic. So if you all want to use the chat and like talk to one another, I highly encourage you to do it. It's not going to be distracting. In fact, if you want to turn your camera on and dance throughout this session, I encourage you to do that too. So please know that you're welcome to use the chat as much as you like. And if you were typing something, please continue to type it for that rule to revisit. We'll always come back to things. So I want to take an ecological approach as we think about this equity auditing process. The first part of it is that acknowledging that we're looking at this as an ecology. So what is an ecology? It's a branch of science that is concerned with the interrelationships between organisms and their environment. What does that mean? People in places. So it is the totality, all the different components, all the different complexities of organisms in their environment, of people in spaces. And so the most important part of the definition, at least to me, is that it's often delicate or intricate systems, that is complex. And my goodness, are we not delicate, intricate, and complex? And so as we're looking at an institutional or organizational change, you're looking at people within an environment, and the relationship between me and the spaces that I'm in is multi-directional. I'm influencing the space and the space is influencing me. And so we have this interrelationship that's happening between people in the environment. So we take this person and environment approach because it really provides us the opportunity to be thoughtful and considerate about the work that we're doing. And so I like to talk a little bit about the why behind the equity audit. This is research that comes out of McKinsey and Company. They did the study in they published it in 2022. The research was conducted in 2014. It was thousands of organizations across multiple, I think over 15 countries. And what they found, at least I don't think will be surprising to too many folks here, they found that organizations that prioritize diversity had better outcomes. They had better outcomes financially. They had better outcomes in terms of the innovation in the work they were doing. They had better outcomes in terms of service provision. Like, just in general, organizations that prioritize diversity did much better. And the reason why I don't think this is surprising is because we see the value in diversity for the most part. I think that has to do with because it's so evident when diverse experiences are present in an organization that it is impactful. But I also think that we're also at a place where we're really comfortable with this because there's so much research on it. There's no shortage of it. And so all of those things come together to really create the case as to why we would prioritize diversity. And it typically happens like this. I work with organizations and they want to diversify the people that they're working with. They want to diversify their staff. They want to diversify the supports with the goal of them moving towards more inclusive practices with a larger overarching goal of striving toward equity. Now, I asked folks in the room, what might be an unintentional consequence of starting with diversity without considering equity, even considering how important we know diversity to be? What might be an unintentional consequence of starting with diversity before considering equity, despite knowing that diversity is so essential? Continuing oppressive systemic isms, Jasmine? Absolutely.
So I was gonna say, for me, equity is really ownership. So if we don't start with basically ownership or a person having an equal role within the organization, diversity of the organization does nothing to address the needs of the participants in that organization. Does that make sense to you?
That makes absolute sense. Absolute sense. That's great. Yeah. Put that in the chat for anyone who's reading along. People don't get what they need. So true, so true. Folks feeling alone, alienated, and unsupported in an environment that is not built for them. So accurate. The current staff may be left behind in the diversity work if it's done before equity work. 100%. 100%. These are absolutely what they ended up finding. And so the surprise maybe in the research is exactly what you all were saying. You knew it was coming, right? We tend to lead with diversity, but diversity is not synonymous with inclusion. Just because we're diverse doesn't mean we're included. Doesn't mean that people feel like they are part of it. People are still being left behind. People are still being left alone and alienated and unsupported, and are recognizing and realizing the environment's not built for them, right? People don't get what they need. These are all of the things that are continuously happening in the environment. So while people said diversity was, yeah, that was nice to have those diverse perspectives, but it was actually the opposite that was happening in terms of inclusion. And so we like to lean on and recognize that people being able to be their authentic selves requires something so much more than having people at the table. There has to be that structural change, as Devon said so beautifully. There has to be that ownership of it, that willingness to do the work. And so if an environment feels threatening, we'll conform in order to achieve a sense of protection. Leaders who take that on, they benefit from more innovative conversations, better learning at the organizational levels, employees who feel confident or engaged because they're bringing their truest self to work. Now, we're not talking about there's the aspect of people's personalities. Personalities are important. People should be able to be themselves. But we're talking about people who are literally reposturing their bodies to avoid harmful or transphobic comments. We're talking about people who are changing their tone, the way that they're dressed, their hair, the way their voice literally comes out of their mouth in hopes that they will have less negative interactions with people in the workplace or better opportunities for advancement. People who are minimizing or sometimes not even talking about their disability, because it's severely going to impact their ability to move up in the hierarchy of the organization because of systemic or structural pressure, right? Not using home language. I mean, there's so many different ways that this shows up, not just in things that are like about our personalities, but parts of our being. Yep. Yeah. Oh my goodness. Not seeing one group as a monolith. Equity is more person-centered, right? Beyond lumping people together. That's such a good point. Yeah, thanks for putting that in chat. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great distinction. And so I love this quote because it comes from more the physiological perspective, and to kind of highlight what that difference is. And if you've ever been in like an equity or inclusion training with me, I talk about like weathering and allostatic load and like trauma a lot. And I think that this quote kind of brings it together so beautifully. When our body or mind experience safety, our social engagement systems light up. They light up. It allows us to collaborate, to connect, to listen, to empathize, to be creative, to be innovative, to be bold. And that improves our relationships, but our lives in general. And I like sit back and I think, what would our organizations look like if people could be creative, innovative, and bold? Like what would be possible where you work if people could be creative, innovative, and bold? How many more people would get served first? How many more programs could be developed? How much more connection could be possible if people could really lean into it? And so McKinsey Company proposed these solutions, and I really absolutely love them. They talk about ensuring diverse representation of diverse talent. And in doing that, making sure that the leadership is then strengthened and prepared enough to hold and support, and most importantly, empower everyone in the community in the capacity for inclusion and diversity initiatives. They also propose, enabling equality of opportunity through fairness and transparency, really thinking about what's not clear, what's not transparent, and what opportunities do we have to grow, but then also like promoting an openness to tackle things like microaggressions, things that are happening tangibly in the moment. Are you prepared? Is there policies? Is there procedures for when things occur? As well as fostering belonging through unequivocal support for multivariate diversity. Diversity in all aspects, right? So what does that look like? And what's the importance of intersectionality, recognizing that, maybe puts in the chat, like not seeing a group as a monolith, and yes. And in recognizing that we want to take an anti-essentialist view to see that people are multi-leveled. People's identities are intersecting. People are not being treated by their identity in compartmentalized ways, but in the compoundedness of the multitude of our identities is how we experience and navigate through the work environment. So I think that that's so important. The only thing that I really resonate with this is that I continue to question after looking at this is to say, well, this still leaves many people with the question of how. How do we do this? What are the next steps in it? And so I like to propose an equity first framework. And so when we take an equity first framework, essentially what we're saying is the sentiments of what Devon shared. We're going to start with the gaps that exist and persist. We're going to recognize that equity is actionable. We're going to see that there are policies and procedures and cultural norms, ideological cultural norms that we have just been navigating through, but continue to impact and impede people's ability to be authentic, to be safe, to not experience oppression. We're going to lean into those as a priority. And in our leaning into those, that is going to allow us to have really inclusive practices, which is then going to lead us to being able to honor and appreciate the diverse talent that we already have, the diverse experiences, the richness of diversity that we already have, and that is to come, which will, inevitably be more easy to recruit, retain, and appreciate because the environment has been critically reflective of the oppression, critically reflective of the types of oppression. And so in that, to bring that back to the person environment, we want to address the gaps, we want to acknowledge and challenge, And we want to be strategically urgent. That means not just throwing things on the wall that sees us sticks. That means not taking 3 years of surveying of workplaces. We've surveyed everyone, the same people for the last 3 years and asked them the same question, to buy time, or, we want to actually do something with what people are telling us that they have experienced. So I want to talk about why we conduct equity audit, and maybe what are some reasons that people come to us to process through an equity audit. It helps to begin to assess that front-facing image. We do, so much of our work is in the actionable part of what we do, the forward-facing work that you do, the people who you talk to on a daily basis, the policies that you promote, the communities that you're going into, the houses, the families, the individuals that you're serving in your work. And also people interact with us in that way, but in a lot of other ways as well. And so when people see your webpage, or when people see the work that you put out, or when people are looking for you and they get the handout from your organization, if it's not web-based, there's something that's communicated there as well. There's something that is communicated there as well. And so the equity audit process helps us to find inconsistencies, incongruence, and sometimes it even helps us identify areas of growth that we have and opportunities that we have to begin to do things differently. So why do an equity audit? So the first part about why people would do an equity audit is to address intentional and unintentional avoidance behaviors. So I've worked with a lot of places where they will use like a lot of neutral language. They won't talk too much about equity, or if they do, they'll or they won't talk too much about racism, or they won't talk too much about classism or sexism. They'll kind of address it on a general level. What might be some intentional reasons why an organization might take that neutrality, or what might be some reasons why an organization might avoid putting that on their website or on their front-facing materials. Someone says, maybe they just don't know what to say. That's true. Yeah. They don't want to ruffle feathers. Their work is connected to different funding sources, or perhaps maybe governmental or federal contracts that might be limiting it. Community's history. Yeah. Neutral language doesn't challenge systems of power. Yeah, but it might be connected to funding. Yeah. Being afraid of potential backlash or consequences like lawsuits. Ooh, it gives them more work to do it. They don't want to do the more work. Who's literally going to do it? What might be some unintentional reasons? And if you're still typing intentional, that's fine. What might be some unintentional reasons why an organization might not address like a form of systemic oppression, or might not address things directly, address equity, diversity, inclusion directly on their website? Concern about not sounding authentic. Kelly, that's a big one. Yeah, unintentional and not knowing, enough about the topic. I often talk about like ignorance by the literal definition, literally not knowing. If I don't know it, then I didn't even think to put it in, right? I recognize my ignorance constantly as I dive more into being more equitable, because there's things I just didn't know. Being uninformed about how to talk about equity. It's uncomfortable to acknowledge the company's shortcomings in that way. Yeah. Unaware of unconscious bias. That's good. That's good. If inequity doesn't affect them, just didn't think about it. Yep. Yep, all great responses. And all things that we see. I remember working with one organization in particular, and they were like, "Oh, we keep it neutral on purpose." And it was a profound and important and beautiful conversation for us to have. It's like, well, what are the benefits of being neutral? And then we talked about what their goals were. Their goals were to connect with the communities that have been systemically marginalized. And so the question that I pose is that if a community has been experiencing anti-Black racism, or a community has been experiencing transphobia, what communication is going to create a sense of truth and trust? And so what we often will do is we'll use, if we go past that neutrality, we'll use really general language. Our company is committed to diversity in all forms, welcoming everyone in their uniqueness. Appreciation for the ways that we navigate through the world, right? That's nice. That was nice. But what is it saying? Right? What is it saying? That was a very nice statement that I just made up off the, but what did it say? What did it say? Yeah. Emily, yeah, maybe some of the geographic experiences. Ooh, yeah, they're not about it. Maybe they're not going to actually do it. For folks or for communities that have experienced the highest levels of systemic and structural oppression, this light, airy, general language does not speak to your awareness, my awareness of being able to address their real concerns, our real concerns. So if I'm experiencing, I'm trying to get into types of recovery housing, and every single house I go into does not have the resources, or the environment is one where I'm experiencing a lot of racism, and someone names that directly, then that's starting to build a sense of trust, that your awareness of the truth, your awareness of the history, your awareness of the complexity of it. And so by being more direct, or finding ways to address the issues of the communities who we're intending to serve more directly, we can start to do the internal work that needs to be done in order to be prepared to provide those types of services. And also, if we're already doing it, communicate that more clearly so that people know that we are potentially a place of support. So I like to often, you'll see I clearly like 3 words with similar letters. So, but truth, trust, and trauma, right? You got to understand what is the truth behind what people are experiencing. We have to build trust, and building trust isn't about having a program, 1 month out of the year, but it's that it's so consistent that every time I come, even if I'm skeptical the first time or the second time or the third time, it don't matter if I'm skeptical, you're going to continue to do this behavior. And now that starts to build a level of trust that I can expect that your organization is going to be able to meet my needs. Are we talking openly about different things that could potentially be experienced in people's bodies as trauma, or events that could potentially be traumatic, naming them and addressing them with a level of accountability, which takes us to the next point on the slide, which is about creating authentic change. It's one thing to look at our site and say we need to have more inclusive faces on this site, we need to use more inclusive language, but it's also about the organizational's preparedness to do that. And a lot of times we can assess, and I'll go through a slide later that talks about different ingredients of change, but can I literally go through and see where the gaps are by doing this auditing process to say, here's an opportunity for us to do something different. And so, there's a formula that I like to use that talks about for people when we're doing North Stars or when we're doing auditing. I take folks through and I say, let's talk about how you communicate accountability, but also how you communicate action. And the one that folks usually leave out is the acknowledgement. And I think that folks have talked about that in the chat. Erica mentioned in the chat that discomfort to acknowledge a company's shortcoming in that way, right? But that also helps to build trust in a community who's not only seen, but maybe even lived through some of those shortcomings. That could be really affirming, but it's also important to be strategic about it and to be able to have an action plan that's prepared for that change. Another way that I see this is a lot of times people will conduct a lot of surveys in their organizations and they'll collect a lot of information, but that next step about what to do with that survey data has not been, something we thought about. And so that can actually rupture that trust process, because here I'm taking the time to be vulnerable, to share, and now there's no plan in action. So we're going to talk more about that, like how to be planful and how to have the resources and make sure that there's an action plan associated with anything that we conduct or any type of assessment we do. And then the other thing that's really helpful about an equity audit is it helps us to think about what we're actually doing versus what we say we're doing. So this can both be positive and negative. So in neutral, right? It doesn't have to be either of those. At either of those, it could be anywhere in a spectrum. But I've worked with organizations who I know, I've sat with them for almost a year, and I know what they're doing, and it's nowhere to be seen or found on their website. And so that's a missed opportunity to reflect the work that they're actually doing in a way that people can interact with it. But I've also seen it where people have really great statement writers, but they're not actually doing it. And then it's a conversation about how does that create distrust, but more importantly, how does it also perpetuate harm? So the process of conducting the equity audit, and we will do some auditing as you all will do some auditing as part of this web series sequence. But the first part of it is to take a strengths-based approach to really look at what's being done, what could be done more, but also being really clear and transparent about what's not present, what's not happening, where are the opportunities for growth, and not dancing around them. Again, that I started off this session with like accountability is kind. It's very kind to be really transparent about what's not present, because it provides the opportunity to make that change in a timely and a strategically urgent way. The second part of the equity process is to utilize different root words and connecting statements to evaluate. So a lot of the auditing process is through like listening sessions or connecting with people, but a large part of what we've been doing with organizations is really taking their written material. So this is websites, this is handbooks, this is procedures. And when we go and we do the assessment on that, I'll literally search through and take root words of different things that they, are hoping or intending to do, and help make critical reflection. So we're committed to anti-Black racism. We're committed to addressing linguistic oppression. Okay, we're committed to addressing linguistic oppression, but people can't access things in multiple languages. We're LGBTQ friendly, but there's no content that talks about trans experiences on the site. So we're using these root words to kind of look through literally everything that's present and say, is this demonstrated? Because if this is a commitment we're making, but we're not talking about it, that doesn't give anyone confidence that we're actually doing it. And so that gets us back to that positive, negative assessment of what do we say we're doing versus what we're actually doing. The third part of it is to assess the disjoint in the messaging. So what are we saying? What are we actually doing? Finding that gap and saying, is there an area of growth there where we need to begin to develop opportunities for change? Or is this an opportunity to present some information differently so that people can access it? The fourth part of it is looking at considerations around accessibility of information. So this is a multi-tier, multivariate assessment, because it's literally in accessibility. Like sometimes folks will post recordings of things and want to promote accessibility, but there's no transcripts available, or the materials would be developed in a way that's not reader friendly. So we're talking about like accessibility. But also, do you have to click through 5 different pages on your website before you get to the content that talks about your services that you provide to communities that are experiencing religious-based oppression? If so, it's not likely that someone who's reaching out or hoping to interact with you all will see that if it's 5 page clicks down into a portal, right? So it's literally about accessing information. And then the fifth component about it is recommendations for both aspirational and occurring efforts. So things that folks want to do and are hoping to do, as well as things that folks are saying that they're doing, and things that are already occurring. And so that's that is a big part of that is strategic planning. So that's kind of what we do when we take folks through the audit process. It goes through all of these different stages and all these different steps. It's a very involved process, right? Probably more than we can get through in the 3-week series, but we're going to actually do some of it together so that you can see and start to think about how to incorporate it at your organization. I just wanted to take a moment to focus on this idea around a strengths-based approach. So these are two of the metrics that I actually physically use in the auditing. We use a couple, but these are two of them. So you'll see that it goes from race equity not yet reflected, meaning that there's an intention that it be reflected. So it's not yet reflected. This is for a racial equity audit that I've done. Then race neutral, the language there. But then there's racial equity is active. You start to see the presence of that, or race equity assertive, which has the action plan. So it's not only describing what folks plan to do, but what folks have done and ways for people to interact with it. So obviously, a lot of times people will be in that not yet reflected or race neutral space, but there's so many opportunities to bring in things that they're actually doing or things that they plan to do, which still communicates in a trust-bearing way to the communities we're hoping to serve. And then there's also a second metric that we'll do that looks at, is equity not yet reflected, not yet apparent, but maybe it's emerging, maybe it's improving, maybe it's flourishing. So you'll notice the really intentional creation of the metrics because it's intended to help move things forward. That's the ultimate goal. So it's clear, it's not yet present, but it also gives the opportunity for something to be emerging without saying that we completely have it. So taking a strengths-based approach is a really important part of an equity audit. And a lot of different people will interact with it at all levels of the organization, as it should. This should not just be for something that's utilized by a senior leadership team. Everyone should be involved in this process. And so it also helps to see the different ways that it interacts. So I'm going to go through this slide because it's going to help us prepare for our next session. If folks really like it, I welcome you. If you sometimes folks like to take a screenshot of it or have it. But essentially, one of the things that we're going to do is utilize it to assess what are the necessary ingredients for change. And I put the reference there for this. And so I don't know about you all, but I don't bake. I can't bake. I would like to try, I think it's helpful. I do have my dish, my go-to dish, but ultimately I know that if you don't have all the ingredients that you need, whatever you're trying to make might not come out right. That's the point that I'm trying to get to, right? But when you do have the ingredients, things come out the way that you intend for them to. And so this is promoting that you need vision, skills, incentives, resources, and action plans. But there's also an opportunity for us to say what ingredients are not on this list, but that are necessary for my organization. So just to take us through it quickly, we might have the skills. Let's say people have the skills. They know what they're doing. They feel confident in what they're doing. The incentive is there. The organizational support is there. There's resources that are being poured into this effort. And there's a plan, an action plan of next steps. But people don't have the broader vision. I know what we're doing, but why are we doing this? Is going to lead people to feel confused. But let's say we do know the why. We have the vision. The incentives are there. People have the resources to do it. And there's an action plan of next steps. But people don't know how to do it. They don't have the skills to do it. That's a very anxiety-inducing experience to try to go and do something that you don't know how to do. You don't have the skills to do it. But let's say you do have that vision, you have the skills, the resources are plentiful, you have an action plan, but nothing's incentivizing that change. This is when you see that slow incremental 15-step plan where people come together once every 2 months to think through strategy. There's not anything incentivizing this change. But let's say you have the vision, the skills, the incentive, and the action plan, but there's no resources. Anybody try to do something without resources before? You know how frustrating that can be. That can be everyone's there ready to go, but the resources aren't there. That's really hard. And then you have the vision, skills, incentives, and resources, but no action plans. That's when you get people just trying things. People are passionate, they're ready, they have the resources, and those resources get depleted really quick because we go in and we have all these false starts. trying to do something without the plan for it. And so we're going to, for you and whatever organization you're here representing, whether that's yourself or if you're representing a particular organization, we're going to help you think through, you know, what might be the necessary ingredients that you all have and what are ones that you might additionally need in order to promote an opportunity for change. So as we think about coming together for the next session, I'm going to ask that you come prepared with one of a few different things. Maybe it's a handbook, maybe it's a document or a policy at your organization, maybe it's an open tab. And I want to say this clearly for folks to see now, here now. I'm not going to ask anybody to share anything about your particular organization. We are going to go through some examples. I'm going to pull them from random organizations that aren't reflective of this group. But one of the things that I'll pull them from an outside source. But I do want you to come with things that are specific to your organization so you can do this in a real way and think about it in a real way that impacts your particular organization. And I just want to give you the opportunity to know that I won't be asking you to share about your organization in any capacity, but instead we'll have an opportunity to do it. Yeah. Someone made a really great suggestion in the chat. If you have other suggestions about things that you'd want to cover in the upcoming sessions, please do that. Just so folks know, someone recommended talking about like photographic representation and authenticity. Yes, let's talk about it. Let's bring that up. And so I asked folks, if you think of, as you leave the room, if you could drop in the chat other topics that you would like to talk about, both for this series, but maybe in other series as well. We always collect that information and we use it to develop other opportunities in the future. So please share that with us. And Lee, is there a closeout slide or anything you want to say about evaluations before we hop off?
I got you. Just give me 1 second to pull it up and then we will be ready to go. All right, on this slide, I will be sharing a QR code that y'all can scan if you have a phone that you can scan it with. But also I have a link that I will place in the chat for our evaluation for today's event. I'm going to stop Ashley's and start my own, but all right. I'm not showing you the full slide, but you know, you can have a little behind the scenes on me. What we've got here is the GIPRA code. So that is our evaluation. It is sent to SAMHSA, so it helps us get credit for the work that we're doing, and also to, you know, let us know if there are things that we would like, things that you'd like to see that you haven't yet seen. So I'm going to grab that as we speak and throw that into the chat. And please feel free to give us your evaluation. It also will open as we close out today's event. So it will open in your browser. So if you didn't grab it from the chat, do not worry. There are many ways for us to share this with you. And again, thank you so much for all of your participation today. And the next session will also be recorded. So don't worry, we will be having this recorded and available on the MHTTC website for y'all. So if you aren't able to get the next one, we will be there and we will put it on the website. So no worries on that. And thank you so much for participating. I'm grabbing all of the chats that are coming in now. So thanks so much, folks, for adding those in. And please feel free to throw those into the evaluation or into any of your messages to us. I also believe I just put my email in there, but my email is also in the chat. So if you have any thoughts or comments, please feel free to give them to us there. And I want to, again, thank you so much for joining us today. And we hope to see you for our next one. The registration, I will also put in the chat. So if anyone needs to register for the second of our series, that will also be placed in there as well. So thank you again. Thank you so much for everything today. And we will see you next week for our next session. Thank you so much.